In Spider-Man's history, there are monsters that come from the outside. The Green Goblin descends on him like a personal curse. Venom looks like rage that learned how to breathe. Morbius feels like a living punishment for an experiment that was meant to save a man. But Man-Spider is something different. He is not an enemy who bursts into Peter Parker's life from the street, a laboratory, or another dimension. He is the moment when the threat awakens inside Peter himself. And that is exactly why this motif keeps returning in Marvel so stubbornly, because it always touches the same fear. The first and most important chapter of this legend begins in the main comic book universe, Earth 616, in the Amazing Spider-Man number 100. By then, Peter is already exhausted by the burden of his double life. Marvel's official summary says it plainly. He wants to focus on Gwen Stacy and free himself from the role of Spider-Man, so he creates a potion meant to strip away his powers. This is not the experiment of a man hungry for strength. It is a desperate attempt to reclaim an ordinary life. Peter does not want to become something greater. He only wants to be himself. And yet, when he drinks the serum, the answer he receives feels like a sentence. Instead of losing his powers, he grows 4 additional arms. And this is where the first true Man-Spider is born. Not as a glorious, stronger version of the hero, but as a man whose own body has begun moving towards something more spider than human. The whole meaning of this transformation lies in the reversal of hope. Peter wanted to remove Spider-Man from himself, but instead awakened even more of the spider within. From that moment on, his problem is no longer just about the mask. It is no longer about a secret identity. It is about a body that cannot be hidden from the mirror. Marvel reminds us that he tried to conceal his condition from Gwen, Aunt May, and Jameson. This is not merely a deformation. It is a crack running through the very center of his life. Then Morbius enters the story, and with him, the entire tone grows even darker. The official description of The Amazing Spider-Man number 101 openly announces a clash between the 8-limbed Spider-Man and the living vampire. Morbius, after all, is also a man broken by science that was supposed to save him. In one story, then, 2 tragedies meet, both born from the same need, to repair one's own body at any cost. Later, the lizard joins the story as well, and suddenly 3 beings stand under one roof, each of them once human, each carrying the mark of a biological catastrophe. Peter's salvation finally comes through Morbius's blood and the help of Kurt Connors. But the ending is bitter. Peter regains the normal number of limbs, yet understands that trying to abandon Spider-Man may have cost him more than continuing to carry that burden ever would. But the legend does not end there. If the Earth 616 comic offers a warning, then the 1994 series Spider-Man, the animated series, turns that same idea into a long, suffocating crisis of mutation. Marvel reminds us that the cartoon was one of the key animated versions of Spider-Man in the 1990s. And the neogenic nightmare arc takes Peter through an increasingly darker version of the same fear. In the description of the episode, The Mutant Agenda, we learn that his neogenic mutation has progressed so far that he seeks help from Professor Xavier, while Beast sends him on to Dr. Landon. This is an important difference from the comic. Here, Man-Spider is not born from one badly calculated serum, but from a crisis that spreads like an illness. In this version, Peter is not fighting a single mistake. He feels his own body taking control away from him, step by step. In the description of Mutant's Revenge, Apple states that after his confrontation with Landon, Peter turns to Dr. Mariah Crawford for help, searching for a cure for his mutation. Then comes the episode, Duel of the Hunters, in which, according to the official description, his horrifying genetic mutation reaches its culmination as he transforms into the Man-Spider. This is one of the most memorable versions of the motif outside the comics. Not extra arms as a single shock, but the full culmination of a biological nightmare. Crawford calls Craven to find him and help save him, while the Punisher simply wants to destroy the monster. And it is precisely this conflict that gives the animated man-spider such power. For some, he is still Peter and must be rescued. For others, he is already only a beast that needs to be killed. The antidote ultimately works, but the entire arc leaves behind something far darker than a typical superhero adventure. A vision of power that no longer serves the man, but tries to replace him. And yet, even this is still not the darkest possible version of the story. Then comes What If, number 42, asking the question that has hung over the six-armed Spider-Man from the very beginning. What if Peter never came back? Marvel's official description states bluntly that in this alternate reality, life as Peter Parker becomes impossible because of the mutation, leaving him only to function as Spider-Man full-time. It is only a few words, but their weight is enormous. If Earth 616 shows a man who looked into the abyss and managed to step back, then What If shows a world where that step was taken all the way. Here, Man-Spider is no longer a brief nightmare. He becomes a fate. In this version, we do not even need a detailed description of the scenes to feel the chill of the idea. The premise alone is enough. Peter Parker can no longer return to his old life. He can no longer hide behind normality, behind clothing, behind the everyday rhythm of the city. All he has left is Spider-Man, but not as a responsibility and not as a choice, as a form of existence that can no longer be taken off. And perhaps that is exactly why this chapter of the legend matters so much. It reveals that beneath the whole story of Man-Spider lies not only the fear of deformation, but also the fear of irreversibility. Then Marvel carries this horror even further into Spider-Verse, where the most monstrous version of the entire motif appears. The official profile of Spider-Man Noir describes a mission in which he and the six-armed Spider-Man of Earth 92,100 arrive in a reality where that world's Peter Parker, after being bitten by a spider, did not become a hero. Instead, he suffered an allergic reaction, ended up in a hospital, and then transformed into a hairy spider beast. This is no longer a man with extra arms. This is almost pure body horror, a form in which the human shape begins to collapse under the pressure of something alien. Noir wants to end his suffering, but six-armed Spider-Man rejects the idea, obtains the serum, and administers the antidote on the hospital roof. The young Peter is saved. And this is where Man-Spider reaches his darkest dimension, because that hairy beast is not simply a scarier version of Spider-Man. It is the image of a world where the hero's classic origin story was warped almost from the very first step. Instead of the birth of a city's protector, we get a hospital, an allergic reaction, and a creature that looks like Spider-Man devoured by his own biological aberration. What is more, this story contains a paradox that gives the whole legend even greater weight. It is the mutated, six-armed Peter who recognizes the human being where others see only a monster. As if only someone who once came close to losing himself could refuse to write off another Peter too quickly. When all these versions are viewed together, it becomes clear that Man-Spider is not one character, but a recurring Marvel nightmare. In Earth 616, he is a man who wanted to reclaim normality and almost lost his humanity. In the 1994 cartoon, he becomes the culmination of disease and advancing mutation. In What If, he turns into a condition with no way back. In Spider-Verse, he becomes a hairy beast in which the human being almost disappears beneath Spider's skin. Different worlds, different media, different forms, but always the same fear that Peter Parker may one day wake up on the wrong side of his own power. And perhaps that is why Man-Spider hits harder than many of Spider-Man's more spectacular enemies. Because he does not ask how strong a hero can become. He asks how much of Peter Parker will remain when the spider side of his nature stops being a tool and begins to dominate. He is not the fulfillment of a fantasy about greater power. He is its darkest consequence. Because the worst monster in Spider-Man's life does not always come from the outside. Sometimes it awakens exactly where the hero most wanted to save himself.